Hello YouTube. I'm here in my garage this evening checking out my Chevelle. Like I said, my fuel gauge isn't working, so I'm going to show how to diagnose such a problem. It's not complicated at all, but let's check it out. Let's start beginning to end, and I'll show you how to check that. As you can tell, the fuel gauge pegs over all the way past full. I know the car is not full, it's not even near that full. I know I put about 10 gallons in it the last time. So we obviously know there's a problem. Most GM cars, they have a potentiometer, a variable resistor basically. The float arm is hooked up to the sender, and it goes to the sender. It has a sender wire that goes to the gauge itself. 0 ohms. Ohms is a measure of resistance. 0 ohms is usually empty, and 90 ohms or somewhere around there is full. One side of the sensor goes directly to chassis ground. The other side, usually on this one, it goes to a connector, and then it goes straight to the gauge, and that's how the gauge knows if it's full or if it's empty. So on this car, the first thing we're going to do is, you don't need any kind of fancy equipment, to be honest. All you need is a jumper wire. If you know your circuit is the same way that it goes to ground, like this circuit does, all you need is a jumper wire and chassis ground, a good ground. So you take one side of your jumper wire and you hook it up to your battery ground. Fortunately for me, my battery is in the trunk, so my battery ground is right there. Then you take the other side and you plug it directly to the connector. The connectors I'm plugged into head straight to the gauge. So from here we should be able to tell we're simulating 0 ohms resistance, which means it's going straight to ground. It's past full, like I said it was earlier, but that's not the correct reading. And we turn the key on, we have the circuit grounded, and as you can see, it's sweeping down. Should sweep down to empty. If you had an inaccurate gauge, you could use either resistors, plug in different resistors to ground, and from there you'd be able to check 1/4 of a tank, 1/2 a tank, 3/4 of a tank. But I know the gauge was working accurately before I messed with the tank, so this is a good enough check. If the gauge did not move, you could just move further upstream all the way until you get to the gauge unit. Then you would be able to eliminate a broken wire or a faulty gauge. So now we know, from using that jumper wire, we know that the circuit is good upstream from the connector all the way up the wiring all the way to the gauge. So the next thing we need to check is we need to check downstream from that connector to the fuel sensor and the chassis ground. For this step we're going to need a voltmeter. So we set up our voltmeter. We set up our voltmeter for ohms, which is a resistance reading. One side we hook it up directly to battery ground, chassis ground. It shows out of limits, which is an open circuit. It means that they're not continuous. Whatever it's checking, it's not connecting to each other. Then we take the other lead and we hook it up to the fuel sensor, and we still show out of limits, which means the circuit is open. So I know for a fact that the chassis ground is fine. I remember working with that. The sensor wire is fine. I'm hoping maybe it's a connector, or next thing it could be is I could have damaged the sensor whenever I was cleaning out the tank. For the next step, I'm going to have to drop down the tank and see what we find. So now that we have the sender out, now we'll go ahead and try to figure out what's going on, whether it's the actual resistance part that's open, or maybe a loose connection somewhere. I should be getting some kind of reading here. I'm getting nothing. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. I'm getting oh well, it's an open circuit. That was from the sending it signal to the ground. Now we'll try the ground circuit, see if the ground circuit is good. Ground circuit on the sender to ground on the body terminal. That's showing good. So we're going to try the body. Well, that's good. We're going to go to the signal in the back. We're going to pigtail off of it, because the signal goes to ground anyways. The actual sensor in here goes to ground. We're getting about 8 ohms, 13 ohms, that's at empty. And we are reading resistance about 105 at full. So the meter is working, and this little ribbon wire is not broken. That's what I was afraid might be broken. The stud for the sensor stud to the stud works. It has continuity. Now it's getting some continuity to the ribbon. I don't know if you can see that, but I believe we just have a poor connection there. Not really loose, but there's this crud on there. I don't know if moisture got in the tank or what it really was, but there's some white crud all over right there. I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up. I'm going to try to clean that off, see if maybe I can get a better connection. Hopefully I don't break it. It's pretty weird how they put this stuff together. It looks like what I call a powel nut, just holding a ribbon cord on it. What I'm going to have to do is pop off that powel nut. Okay, so this is what I ended up doing. Let me see. If you can look in here, this is where that little stud goes through. The stud actually passes through the module. That way it can be sealed and won't let any vapors out. So the stud goes straight through and it's insulated all the way around. Then there's this ribbon cable that hooks up to it. That ribbon cable was actually loose right under this POW nut that I guess it's some kind of a crimp, just holds it against that terminal to make contact. There was all this white crud on there. I don't know if it's from moisture or alcohol in the fuel or maybe even sugar in the tank. I have no idea. But there was a poor connection between the ribbon cable and the actual stud terminal that goes through. So I couldn't really take it off. I could probably take it off, but I had a chance of breaking this stuff. This stuff is so old. So what I did is I got an upholstery needle and I lifted it up enough. I worked the ribbon cable back and forth, kind of make it grind against itself. Sprayed some parts cleaner in there. Then what I did is I got a socket, probably about the same size, a quarter inch drive socket on both sides. Held it up against it like so. Got my channel locks and just squeezed down. Because what I think might have happened was that POW nut might have given a little bit to where it was actually loose against that ribbon cable. It was causing the ribbon cable to cause a loose connection. I don't know if maybe I bumped it or maybe I did something to it the last time that I was in here cleaning the tank. I had this white crud all over in there, and like I had to clean that stuff out. I might have bumped it, or maybe it was just from vibration. But anyway, since I'm here, I'll go ahead and show you what I ended up doing. When I took the sender out, the sock, the actual pre-filter in there was like so deteriorated. It had a slit through it, and it was so deteriorated when I actually tugged on it, it just disintegrated in my hands. I had this C5 fuel pump from a Corvette, probably about a 98 or 2000 Corvette. I can't even remember. But the fuel pump worked. That's why I ended up keeping it. It wasn't transferring fuel over, so there was some other parts that it needed. But the sock had this weird shape to it. It actually stuck out so far. So I just clipped that off and put it right onto this my sender. It gave it a whole lot more of a pre-filter, which really doesn't matter. It's not like it's fuel injected or anything, but it gave it a whole lot more pre-filter, and it slipped right on. I just put a clamp on it. It worked fine. So now we're getting continuity as far as let me go ahead and show you the fuel sender working now. So we go to the signal. So that's at full. We got 107 ohms. And then we sweep it, and we're getting a clean sweep all the way through. And we're getting about 12.7 ohms on empty. That's good enough to sweep the gauge on the Chevelle. So it's working. I didn't have to buy a part. So now I'm ready to put this thing back in. You know, not that I don't trust my work, but it wouldn't hurt to test it one more time. Awesome. What's even more awesome about it is I didn't have to order a fuel sender. Anyways, now we got to put the sender back in the tank and see what kind of reading